A very warm welcome to everyone to this webinar hosted by ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. My name is Luisa Weiss and I work in the ICLEI Capacity Center, and I will be facilitating this webinar from the technical side for you today. I will say a few words to how we use the system that you have logged onto. So for the duration of the talks and presentations given, you will be muted. However, we warmly welcome your questions, suggestions, and input to the talks. And we ask you to do so by typing your questions in the question box that you see in the GoToWebinar navigation pane in front of you. In the end, we will have a question and answer session, and we are happy to answer your questions or engage in a discussion with you. If you have technical difficulties, please also type them in the question box, and I will be happy to help you as far as I can. I hope you enjoyed this webinar with us, and I am handing over now to my colleague Agathe Cavicchioli.
Thank you very much, Luisa. Good morning or good afternoon to all of you, and thank you for joining us today in this webinar on COP22 outcomes for local and regional governments, facilitated by the ICLEI World Secretariat. My name is Agathe Cavicchioli. I'm a project officer at ICLEI, and I will be moderating today's session. In today's session, we will hear from three panelists. His Excellency Aziz Mekouar, Ambassador of the COP22 Presidency Steering Committee for Multilateral Negotiations, will be joining us in the course of this webinar if his busy time schedule allows. We will then hear also from Yunus Arikan, Head of Global Policy and Advocacy, as well as the local governments and municipal authorities focal point at ICLEI. Finally, Mrs. Susanne Nolden of the Department of International Affairs and Global Sustainability of the City of Bonn will also be giving us a short presentation. Today's contents of the presentation include the official COP22 outcomes, the engagement of local and regional governments at COP22, partnerships of local and regional governments in Marrakech, and the way forward towards COP23. We thank you all for your attention, and we will welcome a Q&A session after this morning's presentations. Over to you, Yunus.
Thank you, Agathe. Thank you, Luisa, also for your support. I also echo my colleagues to welcome you all from all parts of the world. I see a couple of names that are familiar from a broad diversity of countries, and it's a great pleasure and honor to join you in this discussion. As we have summarized the content-wise, we will start with the official COP22 outcomes. If you can recall from our previous dialogues, when we are engaging in the UNFCCC process on behalf of local and subnational governments, we first follow very closely what the whole agenda of the negotiations are evolving, and then we develop our own positions as well. Therefore, it is important that we understand what has happened at COP22 in terms of official outcomes, and then we go into our own proposals and bottom-up initiatives. So if we can summarize this historic event, we can highlight that there are three main outcomes. One is the Marrakech Action Proclamation. Second is a set of decisions, and then Marrakech Partnership for Global Climate Action. Each of these three have unique, of course, dynamics. The first one, Marrakech Action Proclamation, is in fact a continuity of the spirit of Paris, in the sense that the climate agenda is endorsed by heads of state level from a huge number of countries. So there were around 80 heads of states. So this is one-page document, but this shows us that it's not just the ministers of environment or ministers of climate, but heads of state are endorsing that Paris Agreement and the UNFCCC is going forward, whatever happens at the national and global levels. The second important point of the Marrakech Action Proclamation is that it links climate to sustainable development. This is particularly important because We all know that we are in the age of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, strong role of the SDGs, and of course now for us local governments, the New Urban Agenda. And climate change has an important role in connecting all these agendas, both in terms of the success of climate mitigation will help us to meet these goals, but also in case we fail, all the other goals will also be definitely impacted by the impact of the climate change. And the third thing is that if you read the text, it makes a direct reference to action by governments at all levels. This is again fulfilling or following the Paris spirit that it's not only national governments, it's also local and subnational governments, and of course other actors of the society. Therefore, it is important, as you can all remember, in the middle of the COP22, there was news from the US in terms of the elections. So we have been following, of course, the proposals that's coming from the president-elect, and how he will engage with the global agenda and Paris Agreement is, of course, one of the debates. But I think this strong message from all countries that there is no way back is, I think, helpful for the debates in the US as well. So if we go to the decisions, as you can recall, we are in the age of three parallel processes. One, the bigger umbrella, the UNFCCC, which is abbreviated as COP22. Then we have the Kyoto Protocol, which is still in force. It is implemented by those parties who are signed to that, and there are still provisions for this in terms of commitments, transparency and accountability of the goals under the Kyoto Protocol. And now we have the Paris Agreement. So the outcomes the decisions are all related specifically to each of these. If we go through the whole set, I think it's around 50 different decisions. We can highlight a couple of critical ones that are relevant for local and subnational governments. The first one is the Paris Committee on Capacity Building is an initiative of Paris Agreement, and it has a strong reference to action at the subnational level. So this committee is now established, and it will start to work. There is a strong justification for us to be involved because it also helps our local and subnational governments to increase their ambition and actions. The Warsaw International Mechanism, loss and damage, is also a legacy from COP19 in Warsaw. It has a specific reference in the Paris Agreement that it refers to vulnerable communities, and the decision also refers to that the target audience involves governments at all levels, which is again a good direct relevance to local and subnational governments. The other process is technology mechanism that we should follow. That's getting more and more attraction. And then now we have clarity that starting from May 2017, there will be processes to review the NDCs. It will be in 2018, but the next year will also be a building block of this process. Very important decision, and the first decision of COP22 is that the parties welcome Marrakech partnership. The language is important, as you can all remember. It was at the beginning, it was only relatively modest. It was just taking note, but at the end, the parties welcome the Marrakech partnership, which is a strong indication that the champions, Minister Hakim El Hayte and Ambassador Tubiana, has delivered their functions and they have built a trust. This is very, very important. We will deal this later on. And one important decision is that we have now the Executive Secretary, which is at the level of Under Secretary General of the UN, which is very, very important because this leverages the profile of the UN Secretariat here in Bonn to a very important role in the whole UN system, which means that once now we have the Secretary General starting its work on the 1st of January, any processes on the UN reforms or connection to the UN agendas, the role of UN Secretariat will be much more important. So now the third one, Marrakech Partnership, is the engagement of all non-party stakeholders in the climate agenda. This was spirited from Lima, Paris, and in Marrakech. The key thing is that there was a number of sessions, we will go into details later on, but there is now a revised thematic approach, and we have now an annual engagement cycle, which is, there is much more clarity on how non-state actors and local and subnational can interact with this process, and we have now also heard that there is a high-level champion announced in Marrakech from the Fiji presidency, who would host the presidential process in 2017 and 18. So this is overall the official outcomes. If we go to the second agenda, which is what the local and the regional governments have done in Marrakech, we can also clarify in three main headings. First of all, we had our traditional summit, which is the bottom-up proposals of local and regional governments. Second, we had been very active in the green zone, in the cities and regions pavilion. And then we were active altogether in the blue zone, which is the official negotiation area. In particular, through our side events, we are the engagement in the global climate action agenda and our interventions as local governments and municipal authorities. If we look at the Marrakech Climate Summit for local and regional leaders, this is this year particularly emphasizing on climate finance, and we have adopted our declaration, which is setting up a global action framework until 2020. And this document highlights three main elements of climate finance. First, capacity building efforts for our members or constituency, the local and subnational governments, and their access to funding, so that we should be better improve our proposals, projects, and connections to the financing processes. The second point is that there should be a better dialogue between global financial ecosystem and the ones that should be improved as well, and the local and subnational governments in terms of access, dialogue, and partnerships, so that they hear our priorities and they also design the global financial architecture according to our priorities. And then, of course, in terms of those ideas put on paper should be easily shared with all the other cities around the world, so that city-to-city learning and disseminating proposals should be a key area that we should improve our capacities. In terms of the green zone, this was also an experience, especially starting from Paris. There was a local government launch in 2009 in Copenhagen, but in Paris we had expanded it much bigger, and in Morocco we had received particularly a strong support from the Presidency, Minister of Interior, and local and regional associations, Regional Association of Moroccans, and Local Council Association of Morocco government. This was a 2 weeks agenda, and it was supported by international networks. I think that was also an excellent demonstration of different levels of collaboration. And in terms of side events, especially on the 14th and 15th, we were very active. But there was 2 weeks. Throughout the 2 weeks, there was a diversity of side events and especially in the high-level segment in the second week, LGMA constituency intervened with a number of statements from a wide variety of partners and representatives. If we look at the partnerships, what has been launched in Marrakech, in particular engaging local and regional governments, we can highlight four main areas. The first one was the Marrakech Partnership, and the second one was the Low Emission Solutions Conference. There was an announcement on 2050 Pathway Platform, and there was also an initiative on 100% renewables for 1.5 degree target. In terms of Marrakech Partnership, this was building throughout the year, and in Marrakech there was 8 work streams, and one of them was dedicated for cities and human settlements. It was particularly focusing on resilience and buildings. And this day, on the 10th of November, we had showcases and dialogues throughout the day. If we highlight what has happened or what has come out of these full days, first thing is that we had for the first time engaged with ministers of housing in the UNFCCC process. From France and Morocco, we had the ministers, and they had opened the door for us to connect the climate agenda and the new urban agenda. That was one of the good outcomes, and I think for the next year's sessions, this would be our priority, that we should make more and more interaction between ministers of environment and minister of climate and ministers of housing. Second, we had received a good mapping of the resilience and buildings initiatives during the day. We had local, subnational, national, and global initiatives. We had seen the interactions and the evolution, and we have underlined where are the new areas that we have going forward. We have launched, together with a broad diversity of partners, the 2018 International Cities and Climate Change Science Conference, and now we are collecting the proposals from host cities, and this was also important that was coinciding with this event. In terms of the initiatives, we have highlighted Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy as the one that is the most relevant for connecting local commitments to the national contributions. We hope to build on this in the next weeks and months ahead. We have highlighted the role that the Residencies Congress, the Global Alliance for Building Construction, Cities and Climate Finance Leadership Alliance, and the Marrakech Roadmap for Local and Climate Finance were highlighted as key areas and a number of processes that will be implementing the whole proposal that we have discussed. We have highlighted the need for a synergy. You would go through the agenda in the road to Bonn. We would highlight a number of other areas. And we have also seen throughout these 2 weeks, not just the cities and resilience or buildings, but there was also a strong recognition of local and subnational governments in water agenda, transport agenda, and food agenda. That's also demonstrating how strong we were all together as a constituency. In Marrakech, we have seen another unique agenda, which was the Low Emission Solutions Conference. It was for the first time a Blue Zone interaction, not a negotiation meeting, but bridging policymakers at all levels, including ministers, negotiators, and local and subnational leaders, with business and academia throughout 3 weeks, 3 days of intensive dialogues. And I think this was also giving us the hope that all these goals of the Paris Agreement can be much more accelerated if we build upon these partnerships. 2050 Pathways platform was unique because, of course, the Marrakech Partnership Agenda was the 2020, which is the immediate low-hanging fruit. But if we are serious about this 1.5-degree goals, definitely we have to increase our 2050 commitments. And this was a global initiative. A number of national governments and partners were involved. And it started also with 30-plus cities, states, and regions, and it will evolve further because we know there's a lot more. And it is giving us the confidence that the long-term sustainability goals would be much more influencing the success of the Marrakech and Paris Agreement. There was a unique initiative. 1.5-degree target is a key element of Paris Agreement, but without 100% renewables and full transformation, it is impossible to reach this target. Therefore, a broad diversity of partners launched this call, and there was a number of cities and regions who are already involved in this process, and throughout the COP, we have seen how they were all acting together. I would like to reserve a couple of minutes to the Marrakech Partnership, especially the new vision that was a result of all these discussions, because there was a big high-level day, and at the end of the last day, there was the release of the final document. The important thing is that we have now an interesting stakeholder engagement logic and process, where you can see that now under the sustainable infrastructure, we have a human settlements, which is a broader topic, but interestingly, we are now seeing an actors matrix, and the local and subnational governments and their municipal providers are referred in different categories, which is cross-cutting to all these themes, which gives us the opportunity that we can raise the ambition and accelerate action much better if we can ensure the vertical integration appropriately. And Marrakech Partnership, the champions, have also now proposed to have a year-round working, not just focusing on the last couple of days of COP, but this will be an expanded partnership, hopefully now with the support from the COP decision, hoping that there will be additional resources and now engagement. Throughout the year, we will have regional meetings, we will have thematic discussions, technical expert meetings. There will be regular summits annually, and then we will all feed into the COP at the end of the year. That is now the new vision under the Marrakech Partnership. I'm almost concluding my interventions so that we can have more opportunity of dialogues. But this is in short, not just the words, but as you all know, photos and visuals are much more stronger than words. So there's a couple of nice memories from Marrakech that we had been around from inside and outside with high levels residents from especially the host country. It had demonstrated all its resources, and that was impressive, and we were all enjoying this strong support. But there was a diversity of inside and outside activities. All these discussions we had been enjoyed by a broad diversity of partners all around the world. And we could also, during the couple of days, there were interesting demonstrations. We joined the celebration to Ban Ki-moon and his last COP, and there was also a number of side events that also attracted ministers, and also the European Union, Global Covenant of Marriage were all very visible in all the events of this process. So my last slide is in fact the road to Bonn, which after this slide I will have the pleasure to give the floor to Susanne Nolden, who's just sitting next to me. So throughout the year, there will be a number of events, milestones that will impact our work. January is important because we are expecting the bids to submit to host the conference in 2018, scientific conference. In February, there is a number of deadlines, and so that we should start to prepare our submissions. One important one is on the workshop on stakeholder engagement, and there is also the G20 Ministers of Foreign Affairs meeting in Bonn, and because of the Secretariat, seat of Secretariat, we will see what we can do in this event. March is relatively modest. We have one regional event in Africa. In May is extensive. Almost every day there is an event. The first half is in Bonn. We have Residencies Congress and the UN. There is especially a stakeholder engagement workshop. Immediately over during the second week, UN Habitat will have the Guardian Council in Nairobi. This will be the first process after Habitat 3. And in Cancun, there will be the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction, and G7 heads of states will also meet in Sicily. G7 is important because last year there was a first time ministerial environment ministers and mayors met in the G7 umbrella, and we hope to continue this year as well. June is busy with the Metropolis in Montreal conference, and SDG 15 Oceans Forum is important for a number of reasons. One is that it's also hosted by Fiji and a small island state, which is the presidency of this year in climate. July and September, there are a number of events that is not fully announced in terms of exact dates, but one important thing is the high-level dialogue for the follow-up and review of Habitat 3, Eco City Growth Summit, and we are expecting to have an announcement on Climate Change Conference to be hosted in Marrakech, but we can expect finalization in the next couple of days or weeks. In October, there is another regional event, but it's a global emphasis also is the Eco-Mobility Festival, which was continued legacy from Suwon and Johannesburg, and we will be now for 1 month in Kaohsiung to promote the non-motorized and public transport as a key to air quality and climate action. In November, we'll be in Bonn. This will be, of course, a hot topic. And then at the end of the year, we'll go to Nairobi again to join the 3rd UN Environment Assembly. All these agendas, if you can imagine, are fully linked to each other. And the good thing is that now the COP in Bonn will help us to connect all these. Now I'm finishing my session, and Susanne Nolden is joining us. Now she will tell us the vision of COP23 in Bonn.
Hello, everybody. I would just like to ask if Ambassador Mekouar is already with us. This is not the case, so I take it. Is he? Agathe?
Hello, Susanne. No, you're welcome to go ahead with your presentation. Unfortunately, the Ambassador Mekouar hasn't joined us at this moment. He's still held up in previous meetings. So please go ahead with your presentation, Susanne.
I just wanted to make sure, so welcome, bienvenue, everybody. It was amazing to see the pictures of Marrakech. It has been the first COP after the coming into force of the Paris Agreement, and I think we can all be grateful of what the Moroccan host and presidencies have set up in Marrakech, and especially on behalf of local and subnational governments. I'm personally just coming back from Cancun, where the biodiversity agenda had their COP. It will finish tomorrow, and there also has been local governments and subnational governments summit, which I will come to later. But now I will focus rather on the climate process. I'm very happy that the climate agreement of Paris now walks its talk, and this is also a success of cities and regions. Cities and subnational governments are drivers in ambition and implementation of global agreements, and this is visible not only in the agreements itself, but also alongside the COPs, shown by events like the Paris Summit and the Marrakech Summit now. There is a long history of local and subnational summits since 1993 already, and Bonn had the honor to be the venue of 2 COPs in that time. It was 99 COP5 and 2001 the COP6B, the one which took place in summer because The Hague had failed for the Kyoto Protocol. And the good thing is, then at the time we handed over to Marrakech to be the next COP presidency, and now Marrakech hands over to us, which is just great. The local and subnational summits in Paris and Marrakech have been a great source of inspiration, cooperation, and have stimulated enhanced action. And now it is time to think about the next COP, the COP23, which will now be taking place in Bonn. I always talk about it is hosted by the UNFCCC Secretariat. It is chaired by the Fiji Islands, and it is venued by Germany and Bonn, and I'm very proud to be the place of this important event and to use the window of opportunity for local governments and subnational governments to bring topics and agendas closer together in Bonn, because we're now at a point where both vertical integration and synergies among global processes will become more and more important. And of course, we should continue in enhancing community engagement and empowerment. When I'm coming back to Cancun, where I just were, local and subnational governments were really at the heart of the COP. Namely, their summit took place in the main negotiation hall. On the weekend, the negotiators had only minor meetings, and the main negotiation hall was cities and subnational governments. This is incredible, and I would wish for our conferences to be closer and closer to this impact, visible impact in the COPs. Now coming to November 2017, and you might have guessed it, ICLEI and Bonn have already thought about how we can convene local and regional and subnational governments to continue the good tradition of summits. So I'm very happy to announce today that ICLEI and Mayor Ashok Sridharan, in his capacity as Mayor of Bonn and First Vice President of ICLEI, have taken the initiative to launch the Bonn Climate Summit of local and regional leaders in Bonn. It will focus on partnerships for raising ambition and action at all levels, coming to the vertical integration of NDCs, to synergies between the global agendas, to enhancing global and local community engagement and empowerment. ICLEI will be the main organizer, and the summit should be co-hosted by Mayor Sridharan in his 2 capacities. And in these hours, a letter will go out to Hannelore Kraft, who is the Minister President of North Rhine-Westphalia, so our subnational government. Of course, the local government and subnational government scene doesn't consist only of Bonn, North Rhine-Westphalia and ICLEI. Therefore, we target a cooperation with the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy and the Under 2 Coalition. We would like to follow the good tradition of convening a steering committee. This has worked out perfectly well for the summits of Paris and Marrakech, and hopefully this steering committee will be enriched by the expertise of the local governments and municipal authorities constituency, as well as other relevant partners which might be helpful to the process during the next year. We have also directed ourselves towards Her Excellency Executive Secretary Patricia Espinosa for her support. And of course, I know that there are representatives of the Paris Presidency of 2015 in the call and of the Moroccan Presidency of COP23. We would love to rely on their expertise as well and the incoming presidency of Fiji. The climate champions are an essential part, have an essential part in our outreach and are a brilliant example to be displayed in the conference. The German government will hopefully also endorse the conference. And we hope that the steering committee will set up a multi-diverse program mirroring the special situation of the process after the coming into force of the Paris Agreement, the presidency of Fiji, and the roadmap of local and subnational governments. That is it for the moment. My personal hope after Cancun, where the Quintana Roo communique talked about bringing global agendas closer together, would be that Bonn in November 2017 should be the place where this milestone can be set together. Thank you for your attendance.
So we now hand over to Agathe, because we now see a couple of participants, but probably the COP22 presidency will also now intervene. So Agathe, we are in your able facilitator capacity.
Thank you very much, Yunus, and thank you, Susanne, for your presentations. Indeed, unfortunately, we're informed that His Excellency the Ambassador Aziz Mekouar of the COP22 presidency cannot join us this morning. To speak in his stead, we have Mrs. Zineb, Alaoui, Mdaghri from the COP22 presidency steering committee on civil and society, more specifically the civil society activities team. Zineb, are you with us this morning, and are you able to give your presentation now? Let's give Zineb a few seconds to unmute herself, and if not, we will take a round of questions. Zineb, are you with us? All right, then we will then move on to the question and answer session, starting with Shandip Goswami, who asks us if the 5-year loss and damage mechanism work plan can be further detailed. I believe this question...
maybe if you can make a list of questions for us, because there might be some overlaps. Maybe we just read first the questions and then we can compile them. Does it help?
Of course, I'm happy to read several more questions from the audience. Of course, should you want to ask any questions to any of the presenters, Yunus or Susanne, this morning, please refer to the question box. We then have from Sarah Kupka. Thank you, Agathe and Yunus, so far for this really nice presentation. In the constituency meeting with the UNFCCC at the end of COP22, it was mentioned to have a post-COP meeting at the beginning of next year. Are there any news on that? Thank you. Sarah Kupka from NRG4SD. We then have a question from Steve Goller. What is meant by vertical integration of NDCs, nationally determined contributions? And we have a proposed, Emmanuel Pinault from C40. We don't have your full question in written. If you could resend it, or else we might unmute you so you can pose your question. And finally, one more from Shandip Goswami on the global climate actions. The Day on Cities and Human Settlements. At the grassroots level, we find huge resistance to change towards making green building. Was this addressed, and how can this be helped?
Okay. Agathe, maybe if Emmanuel can intervene, because she said that she can, I think, speak.
Yes, Louisa will unmute Emmanuel, because Emmanuel, unfortunately, we don't have your full question in written.
So maybe let's first start with this until Emmanuel can join in the second round, maybe. We just start with the question on loss and damage, and probably it's also can be linked to vertical integration, because these are the two agendas, loss and damage and the national legitimate contributions are all considered initial at the national level. But especially we know that both impacts are occurring at the city level very frequently. Urban poor and all type of urban residents are feeling the impacts. So there is a discussion to start up working groups, and especially to improve the resilience capacity. So this was preliminary 2 years of a working group. We as ICLEI or local and subnational members were not too much actively involved in that, but we are committed because the Resident Cities Congress this year in Bonn will also have a special working session on loss and damage. Therefore, I think now that we have clarity on all these goals, and now that the details are, the evil is always in the details, so how we work on NDCs, how we work on loss and damage, we have to be more specific in terms of what we want to bring to the table and what we would like to ask from nations. And then coming to the vertical integration, Steve, what we are expecting that we have 100 plus countries who have submitted their plans. Some of them has actions at the local and subnational level like waste or transport or buildings. We would like to see these kind of actions increased first, but secondly, we want them to be designed and prepared with local and subnational governments, and even benefit in case appropriate that they can increase the national commitment, because we know there are some local and subnational commitments that are really ambitious. They can benefit, the national governments can benefit. So how we can talk about this verticalization or synergy? This is a huge topic. We have 2 years ahead, and this year in Bonn we can make some concrete proposals. That's why we highlighted it as a subheading. So at the moment we don't have the formulations, but there are a number of discussions going on, and we want this to be more and more worked on this year and onwards. One question was buildings at local level from India, our colleague from India. The Green Buildings Council is expanding also in developing countries, and they were very actively involved in the building section. And they were saying that if we can get local governments on board, this green building standards and then let's say certifications can spread out much rapidly. Therefore, definitely we may maybe consider to consult with Green Buildings Council India offices or our work in India, which is led by our South Asia Secretariat, where they can help us. And we also have strong discussions on district energy in cities, which is also having a strong work on buildings. We can keep you updated, Sandeep, in that sense, if you like. There was a question about post COP22 follow-up meetings. We are in touch with the presidency. Maybe they can join today. Zineb can provide updates. But at the moment, we're waiting for a confirmed date. So Marrakech or COP22 presidency, they want to reconvene, and we are expecting that this will be a meeting, in-person meeting, by the end of January. And we hope that there will be an opportunity that both the presidency and civil society, but the champions and the COP23 presidency, which is Fiji, can join this meeting, so that we can, in one shot, make all dialogues possible so that we can plan our activities. But at the moment, we don't have any update yet. But for sure, in the Resident Cities Congress, which is just back-to-back to the UN meetings in Bonn, City of Bonn and ICLEI would foresee at least there will be a steering committee meeting, so that this can also give us the opportunity to consult in terms of with the presidency and the partners that what we want and how we want. And at the moment, we are still in touch with the President's Secretary, so we didn't announce publicly, but this will be one of our agendas. I've got maybe any other questions in the meantime?
Emmanuel's question, C40.
I think they're connecting now.
Yes, thank you very much, Yunus. We're receiving a flood of questions here. In the meantime, I'm receiving notification from Hamza of the COP22 presidency team, working with Mr. the Ambassador, that she has joined us and is able to say a few words on his behalf. So, Louisa, if maybe you can unmute Hamza, and Hamza, can you hear me?
Hamza, here's Louisa speaking. Please click on the green microphone symbol next to your name. You have muted yourself. Perfect.
Yes, hello?
Yes, Hamza, we can hear you and you have the floor. Thank you so much
Yes.
for joining us.
You're welcome. Well, I'd like to thank you all for the kind invitation. We're very happy to be taking part to this webinar. And I congratulate you on the presentations. So just to start, I'd like to say to make a few general remarks on COP22 and the role of local governments in that framework. First of all, as Agathe said, I work with Ambassador Mekouar as his chief of staff. So we've been mostly involved with negotiations between parties. And so forgive me if I don't have all the details about the engagement with non-state actors, but what I can tell you is that in the frame of COP22, as you said, the implication of non-state actors has been unprecedented, and we think that this trend is here to stay, actually. This is, the ambassador often says that COP22 was the beginning of a new kind of COPs, where the action space will be much more present going forward. So I think this is one of the good news and the good outcomes of the Marrakech conference. Second, I also wanted to say that the actual implementation of the Paris Agreement will mean in practice that projects and programs will be happening in territories, in cities, in provinces. So the involvement on a very concrete, in a very concrete fashion of local governments and cities will be essential and absolutely key to the successful implementation of the Paris Agreement going forward. In terms of the priorities of the presidency for 2017 and the next steps, I just wanted to highlight a few priorities, such as the finance pathway on which we are working actively and about which you'll hear soon in terms of what we intend to do concretely in terms of meetings and engagements with different stakeholders. But basically, the purpose of the exercise is to focus on mobilizing even more and leveraging finance to shift to the trillions and to provide the necessary funding, including innovative sources of funding such as subnational governments, sources, etc. And I think that this finance track will be very, very key in 2017, and it will be a major topic of COP23, and I think that the role of local governments and cities will be absolutely essential in this discussion as well. Then there is the facilitative dialogue of 2018, for which the presidency has been mandated to co-organize with the Fiji consultations on the modalities on how the facilitative dialogue should be held, and these consultations will be open to multiple stakeholders, of course, local governments and cities, and I think that the facilitative dialogue of 2018 is going to be very, very important in terms of helping us to raise our level of ambition, because don't forget that the facilitative dialogue of 2018, when it was conceived of or decided, was going to happen before the entry into force of the Paris Agreement in the mind of most people. But now it is a facilitative dialogue that is happening 2 years after the entry into force of the Paris Agreement. So its impact on NDC implementation and on the level of ambition is going to be, I think, very important, and that's why we believe that the consultations regarding its modalities will be an important focus for us in 2017. And then I also wanted, lastly, just to conclude briefly, I wanted to stress the importance of long-term strategies and the 2050 pathway, because, as you know, when you conceive of a program or a policy in the long term, the approach is very different than when you conceive of something that is meant to be implemented in the next 2, 3, 5 years. When you project, for example, when you try to envision your city in 2050 in terms of how it will source its energy, etc., it's of course the mindset and the approach is very different than when you look at it in a shorter time frame. So I think that the long-term strategies are absolutely essential for the success of the Paris Agreement, and I congratulate you for your focus on these as well. As for the questions that we've received regarding the Warsaw International Mechanism and its 5-year work program, I just wanted to say that the agreement that we reached in Marrakech was on a broad framework of work that will be detailed going further, and particularly at the Bonn session in May. Regarding the engagement in early 2017, we're finalizing the date, and we'll reach out to you through the team of Mr. Liazami and civil society to let you know about the precise date, and we're looking forward to that. And just to conclude very briefly, I just wanted to mention that in 2017 we won't have CMA2. It's going to be the continuation of CMA1. CMA1 will continue until 2018, and the first session of the CMA will be closed in 2018. So these are the few things I wanted to say, and thank you again for having us on this call.
Thank you very much, Hamza, for your presentation. And while we regret His Excellency the Ambassador could not join us today, we warmly thank you for making the time and joining this webinar this morning. We will now hear from Emmanuel Pinault. I believe my colleague Louisa can unmute you, and then if you just click on the green microphone button on your monitor, you will be able to ask your question.
Thank you, Agathe. Can you hear me?
We can hear you fine. Go ahead, Emmanuel.
Okay, thank you. Well, I had 2 questions related to mostly to the 2017 agenda, and I think the representative of the COP22 presidency kind of already answered the second one. But anyway, I will give my questions. So first, thank you, ICLEI, for this very helpful presentation and very inspiring as usual. I have my first question is related to adaptation and resilience, and from your perspective, how can we make the best of COP23 Fiji presidency and the role this country has in the Climate Vulnerable Forum to raise the profile of adaptation and resilience in the lead up to COP24 and in the global stocktake that will be established in 2018? I think this is a very strategic and important question. We are asking ourselves in C40, and I would be very interested to hear from you on that. The other question was related to finance. So you mentioned the Marrakech roadmap on localizing global finance, which can be seen as the latest development on the local advocacy on finance that has been developed by CCFLA, the ICLEI TAP program, the C40 call for action on municipal infrastructure finance before. How can we maximize our joint advocacy on local finance in 2017 based on all the opportunities you presented for this year? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. And while we have a few more minutes before Yunus, maybe you can address Emmanuel's question, I would also like to read two more questions, again on the topic of climate resilience, which ties into Emmanuel's first question. The first one is from Shandip Goswami, who wonders how the UNFCCC can the role of the UNFCCC can play in speeding up the process in terms of climate resilience. And then the second question is from Nazaret Perez, who wonders what the main commitments were coming out of the cities and human settlements track on resilience, especially regarding infrastructures.
Okay, thanks, Agathe. First of all, to Hamza from COP22 Presidency as well. It was really helpful to let's say check and balance whether we were right in our let's say assessment of COP22, and I'm very happy to hear the very consistent remarks and additional guidance, especially that we are still in CMA1. It's always helpful to have the latest updates from the negotiators. And we will follow up all these agendas. Coming to the questions from Emmanuel, first on resilience and adaptation. Let's remember this year, small island states who were very active in designing the Paris Agreement and shaping up the ambition as well. Fiji is hosting a number of tasks, and it's not just Fiji, it's the whole small island states, as Emmanuel mentioned. They are the COP presidency. The ambassador of Fiji is the president of the General Assembly, and SDG 15 Oceans is a hot topic in June in New York in the UN. There will be a big conference. So we definitely believe there will be a strong element on resilience throughout the year, and the Resilience Congress that is timely, that we can collect our collective ideas and come up with our concrete proposals. And let's not forget, we have the disaster risk reduction also meeting in Cancun, because that is a strong discussion also on this commitments of under Sendai and SDG 11 on preparation of local disaster risk reduction strategies, which should be speeded up by 2020. So I believe there is more and more work for us to focus on these kind of technical roles that cities can play and influence now the concrete implementation plans at the global level. I don't want to go into the details. Sometimes it is easy, sometimes it's not, that's for sure. But I'm definitely committed, and I think that will definitely be an issue in Bonn at COP23. Bonn has been hosting the Making Resiliences campaign. The mayor was the champion. And biodiversity, that as Susanne Nolden has mentioned, ecosystem-based solutions has always been a discussion in the other arena. It is now time to bundle all of them so that the outcomes are appropriately integrated to the NDCs, the National Adaptation Action Plans, and other era. But there's no silver bullet at the moment that we have in our hands. One connected to that, all the discussions of, especially the resilience workstream and all the other workstreams are on the web, and you can also hear the links to these documents in the ICLEI's homepage. In terms of concrete response to a colleague from India, in the resilience workstream, we did not make a new commitment, but we said that it is now to build the partnerships that is connecting to health, that is connecting to air quality, so that the residents community is ready to advance in its cross-sectoral initiatives. And our colleagues from ICLEI's Residencies Congress, they can also help you further in terms of what exactly these initiatives can evolve to, and that could be a follow-up discussion on the next after this conference call. But I think these were the main topics that was raised so far, if I have not missed anything.
There's a question about from Eva Baños. Well, we are targeting the 12th of November for this conference because it's the free Sunday in the COP23. And so we will have a chance to also attract some political leaders out of the parties to attend the summit. I think that the date is quite sure. It's like 98%. And when we hear back from Patricia Espinosa and confirm the location, then it'll be fine. We're coming back to you during January, I think.
Thank you very much, Susanne, for this clarification. We've now almost hit the 1 hour mark on this morning's webinar on the COP22 outcomes for local and regional governments. A recording of this webinar will be made available shortly afterwards. I would also like to remind any of the attendees that should your colleagues want to join another session of this webinar, we will be holding one today at 4 p.m. And on behalf of ICLEI, we would like to thank all of you for joining this morning's webinar.
So both Susan and I would like to thank all of the participants and COP Presidency. It was, I think, a very good, timely and a good comprehensive consultation, and we commit to follow up further. And wish you all a nice and happy and safe 2017.
Thank you to Agathe and Louisa for moderating and facilitating this.
Thank you to all for attending this morning's webinar, and we wish you all happy holidays. Have a good rest of the day.